Testing, testing. I think maybe I'll just start that with every podcast. Good morning, or journal. I keep calling it a podcast. I guess it kind of is because I'm just recording myself into a microphone, but I feel like it's more of an audio journal because I'm not here necessarily to entertain more than reflect on yesterday and try and be a better person for tomorrow. Today is Wednesday, the 4th of January, 2023. It is 8:17 a.m. I'm not going to tell you the weather today because no one cares. We're not going to look back on this and be like, "Ooh, I'm really glad he told me what the temperature was on the 4th of fucking January, 2023." But I think yesterday it was a bit of a boring one. Obviously, again, it's not for entertainment purposes necessarily. Although things that aren't meant for entertainment purposes can often be entertaining. You know, like a little kid dropping a bit of plastic and the wind picks it up and you watch them chase it, or like dogs when they jump over, like when they're jumping through tall grass because they can't see, like that. It's not necessarily meant to be entertaining, but it is kind of funny. But I wanted to start this podcast off on a I guess a different note, and I guess tell you guys just reflect on my feelings about something, and it was a point of discussion on yesterday's topic, which was arguing with my wife and the perspective that she has. So for 2023 and at the beginning of 2022, my wife and I did this little project, or this little goal, which was the first 100 days of the year sober. Now, we don't drink very often, but we do smoke a bit of pot. And for those who don't know what pot is, marijuana. We're not strangers to it, and most people who know us know that is the case. Fun fact: I was born at 4:20 a.m. I feel like I have to mention that. I feel like it's more appropriate that I smoke because I was blessed with the time of 4:20. And the proper time too, because on a 24-hour clock, it's the only 4:20 of the day. Otherwise, it'd be 16:20 at night. Anyway, it all came to a head last night. Obviously, with it's the 4th today, so 3 days sober. We're obviously adjusting to sobriety, and so fuses are short and tensions are high, and so we had a bit of an argument last night, and it was about stress around this weekend. We got a wedding coming up that we're attending that we play big roles in, and then on top of that, we've got to leave our cat at home for a few days. I don't know if I've mentioned it on this before, but I guess if I mention it now, then I will. Last year in July, in July of 2022, our cat, he's 4 years old. He was diagnosed with epilepsy. Now, anyone who's got a cat who has epilepsy knows how difficult it is to go through that process. Most cats I guess I'll just explain the process. When a dog gets epilepsy, when a dog has a seizure, it's more than likely epilepsy is the cause. And when a cat has a seizure, there's so many other things that could have affected that we have to say that it's epilepsy. You have to it's a diagnosis by elimination, essentially. So you have to rule out all other causes so that you can start treating for epilepsy. And so I think today I'm just going to spend this podcast or this journal talking about that. Not the argument that ensued yesterday. I don't think that's appropriate or necessary, but I wanted to talk about that whole process and how that has affected our lives, and where we're at today, and I guess just everything around and revolving that. So we'll start with the beginning. I can't remember the exact date, but it was a Thursday night. I know that we were sitting and we were watching telly, probably Sons of Anarchy, I think we were on at the time. I don't really remember, but I remember we have stools that sit up next to the kitchen bench, just 2 stools where we can sit and eat breakfast because we don't have a dining table. And our cat likes to sit up there. Our cats, we've got 2. They're both Otis and Olive. They came from the same litter. They look different, but they are brothers, which is really cool. and he sort of did this really weird meow. He's a vocal cat, but he just did this meow that we were like, well, that's weird. And then he shook his head and he jumped off the stool and he went away, like to the bedroom. And so we got up and we checked the stool and we were like, what's going on? That's weird. And we made sure he was okay. And there was like a little bit of, it looked like oil. It was like a wet spot on the stool. And so overnight we sort of kept an eye on him. Nothing else happened. I think later that night, maybe at just as we were going to bed, he was up on the bed with us and he meowed again, and then he shook his head again, and there was another bit of like sort of oil or dribble or something, and we were like, oh, it's odd. Maybe he's just, I don't know. Maybe he's just having a bad time, whatever. And so the Friday rolls around and he's pretty normal in the morning. But then Friday night hits and we start noticing this weird behavior. Now there's a few different types of seizures. I used to have a cat. His name was Rusty. I had him growing up until I was, in my almost an adult essentially. And he was diagnosed with diabetes. And when cats with diabetes go into, I think it's hypo or hyper, whatever the fuck it's called, they have what's called a grand mal seizure, which is what most of whoever's listening would have assumed was the case. So, the convulsing, eyes to the back of the head, losing control of the body, losing control of bowels and bladder, and potentially throwing up. Depends on how severe it is, but it only lasts a couple of minutes, and usually with it, you can just put a bit of honey in their mouth and they'll come back to normal. And we dealt with that for 2 years with Rusty. We put needles in the back of his neck every day for twice a day for I think it was 18 months when we were told he had 3 months to live. So we made sure he had a good life. With Otis, it wasn't the same. He was having what they call focal seizures. I believe partial seizures or focal seizures. Anyway, they were like little episodes almost. If anyone's seen That's So Raven, it's like, when she goes into that her visions and she sort of like pauses and freezes. It was similar to that, except he would freeze and then he was like biting at flies and then he would dribble and then he would shake his head and then he would meow. And essentially when he meowed, we knew it was over. But we didn't really know what was going on. And so we sort of monitored it. We were hoping it might just go away. Maybe it was an episode. Maybe he was constipated, or you know what I mean? We were just trying to justify it with any sort of I guess explanation so that we didn't have to, because thinking that he's super sick was not on the cards. And so he sort of kept doing those overnight. They started out half an hour, 20 minutes apart. And then by Saturday morning, or by the end of, I guess, Friday night and then into Saturday morning, he was doing them much more frequently, every 5 to 10 minutes. And so I took him into the vet near us, and we'd never been there before. And I had to work on the Saturday. My wife was working on the Saturday. And so I just dropped him off. I said, please, can you look after him? He's not well. I don't know what's going on. It seems similar to the activity that my old cat was having when he was having seizures, but it's not quite as severe. And so we left him there for the day, and my wife picked him up in the afternoon, probably around 2:00, I think. And they had given him an antibiotic injection into the back of his neck, just in case it was something to do with that. But other than that, they said that they didn't notice any weird behavior. Now, this is probably because he was too nervous to act weird in front of people. He was probably on his best behavior because he wanted to leave the vet. Or it could have been that he was doing the symptoms, but they don't know him. So it could just be a normal thing for him. Who knows? Anyway, he didn't get better overnight. So we took him back on the Sunday, but this time both of us had the day off. So we actually went in and spoke with the vet, and she agreed that something was wrong. Gave us some anti-convulsion medication to help with the seizure activity, or the potential seizure activity, and sent us on our merry way. Sunday night hits. I just realized I've got like 10 minutes to tell this story and it's a long-winded one. So Sunday night hits and we're pretty stressed out. Obviously, we've had a little bit to smoke during the Sunday afternoon while we were hanging out. but not enough because we were worried about Otis, and we were just sort of like trying to take the edge off. And 5 o'clock hits, and his tongue starts hanging out of his mouth. He starts breathing rapidly, and having some more severe reactions. And we were worried it was the medication, but it was just his seizure activity hitting like a critical turning point, essentially. And for anyone who doesn't know, when a cat starts breathing through their mouth, it means that they are super stressed or overheating or both. And so it becomes like a point of you need to get them somewhere and get them fixed immediately. And so we rushed him down to the vet. I don't condone driving under any influences, but in this circumstance, I feel like it's forgivable. And we take him to the vet, we rush him in, and we say, hey, I'm pretty sure my cat's having a seizure. Like, can you have him looked at? And it was a 24-hour emergency vet. It was a different vet to the one we'd just been to. It's not their fault that they didn't quite pick up on anything. But there was a point of like, we need a second opinion. And so we went to this emergency 24-hour vet, and we put him in, and he stayed. They basically came and they spoke to us, and they were like, he needs to stay overnight. He's not in a good condition. And we were like, okay, fair enough. And then before we left, obviously we had to pay deposits or whatever. By this point, by the time we picked him up on Monday morning, we were told that we were transferring him to the veterinary referral hospital in Dandenong, because they have much more resources. They've got an oncology unit and a radiation unit. Not a radiation. What is it? Like MRI machine and stuff like that. And all the stuff that normal vets don't have. You don't really need an MRI every day. So we were just essentially patient transport. So we picked him up. By this point, we've spent just under $2,000 getting him looked at with no answers. We take him out to this referral hospital, and we get in and we put him in, and he, to make a long story short, he ended up staying for 6 days. Anyone who knows veterinary costs, that wasn't cheap. It actually hindered us quite a bit, but we'd do anything. He was like, he's our son, he was our first baby. We brought him home. He was the light of our life. It is the light of our life, and so we were very fortunate to be in a position where we could pay for it, or we have good enough credit that we could take money out and call upon favors and get it all paid for, so that we can obviously pay it back later. But he, the second day he was there, on the Tuesday, he had an MRI. And at this point we had no idea what was going on with him. So we're sitting at home worried sick. And we had to figure out whether it was extracranial or intracranial. So is it outside the brain or inside the brain? And because we've got another cat at home, they were pretty much able to rule out any sort of, toxins or anything in the house, anything he might have eaten, anything like that, because the other cat was completely fine and from the same litter. So, it also makes it like it might not be a genetic thing. He has the MRI on a Tuesday, and on the Tuesday night we find out that there's nothing intracranial. So there's no tumors or cancers. There's no issues like that. And he also had I can't remember the name of it, maybe a CSS scan or a CFS, SCS, I can't remember. But basically they inject a needle into where the fluids are around his brain to make sure that there's no bacterial or viral infections, because they could also be causes of these seizures. And there was nothing there. It was all clear and clean. And so we had... they had the scan looked at by a radiologist, and he was diagnosed officially with what's called hippocampal sclerosis, which essentially is a hardening of the hippocampus. And for those who don't know, a hippocampus is the memory and learning center of the brain. So everything he knows now and everything he could learn in the future is now impacted slightly by this disease. And it's a progressive disease, meaning that every time he has a seizure, it causes more damage. And every time there's more damage, it makes him more susceptible to having seizures. And the cycle continues until he eventually, inevitably dwindles away to nothing. And so in that visit, he also, there was multiple issues. He wasn't eating, he wasn't urinating. They had to put a catheter in. for the catheter to stay in, or for it to go in, they have to leave it in for a minimum of 12 hours. It was pulled out 24 hours later, and he started urinating again, which was great. But in that time, they kept pumping him full of fluids, so he was at risk of congenital heart failure because of the fluid that was building up in his tracheal sacs. It was putting pressure on his lungs and his heart, so he was having a hard time breathing. So we had to spend a few days again in a little oxygen cage, and it was just this whole ordeal that it was terrifying and worrying from our end. But the vets and the clinicians and everything, they did everything they could, and they were looking after him really well. So Otis has been home now for just shy of 6 months. I guess July to Feb will be 6 months. And he is on a course of medication where we have to give him a pill twice a day every 12 hours. And so there's a huge impact on us, obviously, because of that. One that we were prepared to make. We have no idea how long he is going to live here. But for the rest of his life, he needs to be given this medication twice a day. And there's been a rocky road to get here. Obviously, he has lost some weight, so the medication was affecting him differently. We've had to take him back to the vet twice for overnight stays and different courses of medication and different doses. But this most recent one has been the most effective. Anyway, that was a point of argument last night with my wife. We were having this discussion. She's this chronic issue of worrying about things that we can't control. And one of those is that she's going to be away for a few days for this wedding, and she's going to be leaving Otis behind. And she's just worried that she won't be here. She doesn't want anything to happen. And I just want to help. I just want to give advice, and I just want to, it's okay, don't worry about it. And that's not what she needed last night. And so when I'm saying it's okay and it's fine, and I'm trying to rationalize, and she just didn't want rational. She just wanted to be upset about it and have me say it's okay. And I was trying to help her through the logic of it, and I never just said that. So I wanted to dedicate today this podcast to Otis, my little bingy boy, Bingus Stingus. We call him Big Puss. He one of the best things that ever happened to me. I never thought that I was going to love a cat after Rusty. I never thought I was going to allow myself to get close to another animal like that. And if you haven't been close to an animal in the way that I'm close to these cats, you should get a dog, you should get a bird, get a fucking lizard. It doesn't matter. Whatever animal you can get, whatever pet you can get, whatever, there's this beautiful thing that comes from that where, they're dependent on you, and they don't even realize it sometimes, and they love you unconditionally, and it is a beautiful fucking thing. Better than most relationships people can have with other human beings. And so, yeah, instead of rambling and going on about it, I figured that if this podcast or this fucking journal, I'm just going to call it a podcast, I don't care, is, truly about being vulnerable and truly about allowing these conversations to happen and being reflective. If my wife listens to this, I'm sorry that we argued. I know Otis will never listen to this, but I love you, buddy. And, enjoy your day.